Dreaming with Frost, a Distant Dreams and Crystal Frost novella. Written by Alicia Rades. Narrated by Amanda Elgie. Chapter 1. My lungs burned as I inhaled another deep breath. Slow down, my body demanded, but I didn't listen. The stomping of his feet grew louder. Any second now, he'd be able to reach out and grab me. I couldn't let him get that close. I pushed forward until I couldn't sprint any faster. I didn't think I would make it. Just as I reached my max speed, I spotted the clearing. The grass ahead stood as a glimmer of hope. Just a couple of yards left. I increased my stride, hoping that would give me the extra boost I needed to make it there. Those last few steps seemed as long as the last mile I'd just run. Almost there. Finally, I broke through the trees and into the clearing. I did it. I slowed. As I attempted to catch my breath, I couldn't manage to get the words out to celebrate my victory. Instead of saying anything, I shot my fists in the air and turned toward Colin with a grin on my face. He gasped to catch his own breath, but after a moment, he managed to speak. "Congratulations, Kai." Even though my victory meant he'd lost our race up the bluff, I knew his compliment was genuine. Ever since we'd started running together a month ago, I'd been getting better now that I had someone to challenge myself against. We were both going out for cross-country next year, and I figured if we continued training together until next season, we'd both be good enough to make it to state. Colin and I paced next to each other to cool down from our run. I finally found my voice. "Thanks, but you let me win, didn't you?" He shook his head. "I swear I didn't. You're getting faster." I raised a brow. "Or maybe you're getting slower." My lips twitched as I held back a teasing smile. "Not a chance." He didn't even try to hide the amusement in his expression. Neither of us said anything for another minute as our heart rates returned to normal. Colin leaned against the wooden barrier that was supposed to keep people from getting too close to the edge of the cliff. It didn't work. People climbed over and hung their feet off the edge or jumped into the water below all the time. I joined him and rested my hip against one of the wooden posts, staring off into the distance. Just a month ago, I wouldn't have dared cross this barrier. Now I wasn't afraid, not with Colin by my side. Though he'd managed to ease some of my fears, I still couldn't get past the biggest one of all, telling him my secret. The thing was, I wanted to tell him. I just didn't think I could. No one would believe me. Not Colin, not Savannah, not even my family. I'd known forever that my dreams were different than everyone else's, but no one ever believed me when I tried to tell them that my spirit left my body when I slept. No one really knew that I could astral travel. "What is it?" Colin asked. He took a step toward me until I could feel the heat from his body. That was the first time I noticed the chilly evening air between us. Now that I was no longer moving, the November temperatures didn't seem as inviting. I was glad I wore long sleeves in my running pants. Even though I'd dressed for the weather, an involuntary shiver ran down my spine. I wasn't sure if it was because of the air or because of the question he'd just asked that I didn't want to answer. "Nothing," I lied. A red strand of hair escaped my ponytail and flew in front of my face to the rhythm of the wind. I reflexively tucked it behind my ear without meeting Colin's eyes. "Come on, Kai." He took another half step toward me until the chilly air couldn't find its way between us anymore. He took my hands in his, and they warmed my skin. "You have to tell me eventually." Finally, I looked him in the eye. I did it mostly to assure him that nothing was bothering me, which was a total lie. "Tell you what?" He squeezed my hands for encouragement. "Whatever it is that you keep thinking about. You keep staring off into the distance like that, like something is on your mind." I gulped down the lump that was beginning to form in my throat. Colin caught on easily, but I didn't know what to say to him. He wouldn't believe what I could do. "It's nothing, really." My gaze shied away from his again, and I stared out past the edge of the cliff. "Kai," he pressed, "you can trust me." My muscles tensed, and I hoped he didn't notice. I did trust him. I really did. I just didn't know if he would trust me, or if he'd believe me. "I do trust you," I told him. "It's just not something I'm ready to tell you yet." "You can always talk to me. Whenever you're ready, I'm here." He leaned in even closer, and I closed the distance between us to meet his lips. I felt warm here in his embrace, safe and protected. I really did feel like I could tell him anything. Anything but this. Nobody had believed me before. They always thought I was making up fantastical stories. I didn't want Colin to think I was doing that to him. Colin was kind with me, though, and he was patient. It was more than I could possibly ask from him. I curled into his arms. "Colin, I love you." The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop myself. I swore my heart stopped. It was the first time I'd said it, and I meant it. Still, I couldn't believe I'd actually said it, out loud. I nervously glanced at him to assess his reaction. Colin beamed, and a calmness washed over me. "I love you too." He squeezed me tighter, catching me slightly off guard. When he drew away, he spoke again. "That was all you were worried about? Telling me how you felt?" He reached up to brush my runaway strands of hair out of my face. "You don't ever have to worry about telling me how you feel, okay?" I nodded without saying anything. At least I managed to get through the conversation without divulging my secret. But even as Colin walked me home, a sense of disappointment washed over me. Had I missed my chance to tell him about my gift? I wanted to tell him. But I wasn't sure how to explain it to him when I wasn't even sure how it worked myself. I think that's what scared me the most. Chapter 2. Sleep had always come easily to me. It was the one thing I looked forward to throughout the day. When my spirit left my body, I could go anywhere I wanted as if I were a ghost. I'd traveled to so many places, visiting beaches and volcanoes in real time, all without leaving the comfort of my bed. Tonight, the darkness that was once inviting enveloped me uncomfortably. I lay awake, fully alert, with my eyes turned toward the ceiling. I should put some glow-in-the-dark stars up there, I thought to myself absent-mindedly. Then at least I'd have something to stare at. Most nights weren't like this. I could usually fall asleep instantly, excited about where my astral travels would take me. Tonight, I only lay awake wondering about my ability and how I could possibly work up the courage to tell my family and friends about it. I'd always known that my spirit left my body when I fell asleep. For the past 4 years, I knew that if I closed my eyes and envisioned a new location, I could transport my spirit there in a snap. I could conjure up my own image of my clothing or imagine the heat of the sun on my skin, and I could actually feel the sensation. But I'd reached a point where I'd learned all I could on my own. I couldn't be alone in this. If I was, there wouldn't be a name for what I could do. If someone could help me understand my gift, then maybe I could find a way to explain it to all the people I loved. I'd been contemplating this for a while now, ever since my gift returned a month ago, after a short period where my travels had been replaced by nightmares. I'd never been that interested in learning about what I could do. I'd only ever wanted to use my gift to travel the world, to get away. But lately, curiosity had started to get to me. Someone else had to be out there. Someone who could do what I could and teach me what I was capable of. I pushed up from my bed and padded over to my laptop. My mom would have a fit if she knew I was up this late searching the internet. It was a school night, but I couldn't sleep with these thoughts racing around in my mind. I started by typing a few keywords into the search bar. I began with astral travel. I'd researched the term before when I was 12, and I'd come to the conclusion that that's what my gift really was, that I was projecting my spirit onto the astral plane. But I wasn't sure if it fit exactly. Some of my research said that people could travel through time to view past events while their spirit was out of their body. I certainly hadn't traveled through time. I also read that there were several different places you could travel to, not just the astral plane. So which one was I traveling to? And wouldn't I have seen someone else by now if others could do this as well? Regardless, astral travel was the best word I had for it. I pressed my lips together and narrowed my eyes at the screen. I scanned the search results and found several forums detailing people's out-of-body experiences, but I had no idea which ones were true or not. I briefly considered signing up for the forum myself and posting my questions, but then I wondered about the legitimacy of the information I'd receive. I didn't need a group of random strangers telling me about this gift. I needed a mentor, someone who legitimately knew about the paranormal. If I could talk with them over the phone, even better. After reading through several forum posts, I headed back to the search page. I wondered who I could contact, or what they'd even call themselves. A psychic, maybe? On and on, my search continued through psychics' blogs and phone psychic advertisements until I narrowed my search for geographical location. I wondered if there could be someone nearby who was like me. I must have been sitting at the computer for 2 hours before I found a promising webpage. My face drew closer to the computer screen, as if magnetized, while I read about a woman who had admitted to her entire town that she was psychic. The person who'd posted the comment seemed skeptical, but he talked about how the town always had their suspicions about the woman. She ran a psychic-themed shop called Divination, and her tarot card readings were so accurate that he accused her of cheating somehow. I quickly searched the town he was talking about. I'd never heard of Peyton Springs before, but as soon as the directions popped up, my fingers began to shake in excitement. It was a drive, but I could make a day trip out of it. I returned to the tab that talked about the shop called Divination. My eyes narrowed at the screen. Could this lady really know what she was talking about and help me understand my gift? There was only one way to find out. "Why not?" I complained to my mother the following evening. "Why can't I have the car for just the day on Saturday?" My mom let out a breath of air, like she couldn't believe what I was asking. She turned to me after closing the dishwasher and pressing the start button. "Because I'm not comfortable with you driving alone yet. You haven't had your license that long, and in the time you have had it, you haven't gotten much practice." "That's because we never go anywhere together," I wanted to say, but I held my tongue. "But Mom, I'm a good driver." She placed her hands on her hips and stared at me from across the kitchen. "What do you even need the car for?" I shrugged, but inside my blood was boiling. If she didn't let me go, I didn't know what I was going to do. "I just need a day to myself. I'll use my own money for gas." My mother laughed. "It's not about gas money, Kai. It's about your safety. I don't want you driving alone yet." I crossed my arms over my chest. I couldn't believe how unfair she was being. Sure, things had been better between us lately, but she was still my mother and sometimes acted in ways I couldn't quite wrap my head around. "What if someone else comes with me?" I suggested, even though I wanted to go alone. She turned to the sink to wet a washcloth. "You mean Savannah or Colin?" "Yes." She wiped down the counter as she spoke. "That's not any better than driving alone. You'll get distracted with your friends in the car." "Then why can't I go alone? There won't be any distractions then." "No," she said, her pitch rising. "What if Savannah or Colin drove me?" "Kai." She threw down her rag, and I could swear her voice echoed off the kitchen walls. "I said no." "But Mom, end of discussion. But what if—" "No, you're not ready to drive the car without me, and the more you push it, the less chance you have of me letting you go anywhere at all." I was about to suggest that she come with me, but she didn't let me finish. It's not like I wanted her to come. I loved my mom, but I didn't think she'd be the first person I told about my gift. Sometimes I wondered if my ability to step out of my body at night was inherited from one of my parents. I could remember times when I was little, though, that my family talked about the weird dreams they'd had. And I knew I was somehow an anomaly. My dreams never felt as strange as my family described. It always felt real. Just as real as it felt to stand in the kitchen and argue with my mother. I knew that if I tried to tell her about what I could do, she wouldn't believe me. The couple of times I did mention what I'd done while sleeping, it was dumb things like watching cartoons or stalking the neighbor's cat. She would always reply with something like, "That's a silly dream, Kai." Of course, I was like 6, which was right around the time when I started to realize that no one else left their bodies when they slept. When I returned to my room after the argument with my mother, I plopped down on my bed. If I couldn't go meet this psychic lady in person, then I'd have to come up with an alternative. I could call her shop and talk to her, or I could join one of those forums, or maybe— "Of course," I said out loud. I didn't need a car to go somewhere. I could astral travel and find her on my own. Granted, I wasn't going to get any answers out of this lady since she wouldn't be able to see me. But at least I could scope the place out and see if it's even worth the drive over there. It was still a few hours until bedtime, but I was eager to learn more. I slipped into my pajamas and under my sheets and drifted off. Chapter 3. I relaxed until sleep overcame me. Once it did, my spirit stepped out of my body. I gazed down at my sleeping form. I looked so serene, so peaceful. The sound of the TV in the living room reached my ears, pulling me to attention. I tore my gaze off my body and sighed. Braden's show wasn't going to make sleeping very easy. I already felt weak and groggy, an indication that I'd sleep lightly tonight. But I was too excited to wait for my body to fall deeper into sleep. I closed my eyes and visualized the shop I'd seen online. When I opened them, I stood on a secluded sidewalk in a quiet town. The shop in front of me wasn't very big, but its signs and trinkets in the windows drew the eyes. I let out a disappointed sigh when I saw the lights were out and they were closed. It must have taken me longer to fall asleep than I thought. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I took a step toward the shop and peered in through the window. The street lamp next to me illuminated the front of the shop enough that I could make out the silhouettes of shelves and tables. Stepping back from the window, I straightened my spine and took a deep breath. Here goes nothing. My feet moved forward, but I didn't feel the brick wall crash into me. Within 3 steps, I'd passed through the wall and stood inside the shop. After another deep breath to calm my nerves, I stepped closer to one of the shelves to eye the products they had on display. Walking slowly through the shop, I inspected the areas that weren't cast in complete darkness. Magic kits, crystal balls, candles, and more lined the shelves. It all seemed too touristy to me, like it was all just for show. Could this lady be for real? Eventually, I reached a stack of books. I skimmed over each title, and one of the words immediately caught my eye. Dreams. A book about dreams might tell me more about what I can do. I wanted to reach out and grab the book, but my fingers would only pass through it the same way my body had passed through the wall. I stared closer at the cover facing me and let out a disappointing sigh. It read, Dreams, an interpretation of symbols. It sounded more like it was talking about decoding your dreams than explaining my abilities. I was about to turn away from the stack of books when a thud toward the back of the shop caught my attention. I tensed in surprise and instinctively crouched behind the display. "Mom?" a female voice called out. I relaxed slightly when I reminded myself no one could see me. Sometimes I forgot to sort my out-of-body experiences from my everyday encounters, but it was better to heed caution. Though no one could see me, that didn't keep me from inching slowly toward the sound of the voice like I thought I might get caught. "Mom?" the girl called again. A moment later, the hallway leading to the back of the shop became flooded in light. I peeked around the corner and spotted a thin blonde girl who looked to be about my age standing in front of a doorway. Her hand rested on the doorknob to hold it open. The light in the room spilled out into the hallway. "You didn't answer your phone," the girl said to someone inside the room. "Sorry," a second female voice replied. "My phone must have died. These numbers weren't adding up, so Diane and I stayed back to see if we could figure out where the problem was." "Where is she?" The girl with long blonde hair shifted in the doorway. "She left a few minutes ago. I was just finishing up and then was going to come home." "Okay, Teddy has food ready. You said you'd be home earlier, so I thought I'd come check on you." The woman inside the room cleared her throat. "Give me a minute and we'll walk home together, okay?" The girl nodded. Why couldn't my mom be as nice as this girl's mom? She talked to her like she was her equal, not some kid who didn't understand what she was saying. Why was it so easy for some people and not for me? My eyes locked on the girl while she waited for her mother, so I noticed when her body tensed. "Mom," she whispered. I spotted her mother through the doorway. She had the same golden shade of hair as her daughter. She shot her a questioning expression. "Do you feel that?" the girl whispered. Her mother shook her head. "Look." The girl used her left hand to point to her right arm, which still hung from the doorknob. "Goosebumps." Her voice came out so soft that I barely heard it. I figured they must have some sort of inside joke that I was missing out on, and I felt like a creep for listening into their conversation. I straightened up, preparing to turn back to inspect the displays and leave the two women in privacy. Before I could turn away, though, the girl in the doorway swiveled in my direction, and she stared directly at me. My spirit sprang back into my body, and I bolted upright in bed. My chest compressed, and it took me a moment to realize I wasn't breathing. I forced air into my lungs and slowly lowered myself to my pillow. I pulled the covers up to my chin, but my eyes remained wide open. She saw me. What does that mean? I swallowed deeply, but I still hadn't managed to blink. She looked right at me. Not through me, at me. How was that possible? I didn't know, but I knew one thing for sure. I had to go back there in person and get some answers. Chapter 4. Mom wasn't going to let me make the drive myself. I would have accepted that if it wasn't for what had happened while I was astral traveling. I needed to meet the blonde girl who saw me and figure out why. It was possible she could do the same thing as me. Somehow, it seemed like we were connected. I hadn't caught her name, so I couldn't find her online. I didn't bother pushing Mom to let me go. I knew the more I asked, the less she'd be willing to let me do anything on my own. Instead, I asked her if I could stay the night at Savannah's over the weekend, and she agreed. "We're going on a road trip," I'd told Savannah, and her eyes lit up. "I can't believe we're doing this," she told me Saturday morning while applying her makeup. "I know. I just want to meet my friend in person, and Mom won't let me. Promise you won't say anything to your parents? I don't want them telling my mom." Savannah ran 2 pinched fingers over her lips and threw the invisible key over her shoulder. "My lips are sealed. Tell me more about this friend." I fell to Savannah's bed and leaned against the canopy post. "It's just a girl I met online." It wasn't a complete lie, because I found her mom's shop online. But what was I supposed to tell my best friend? That I saw the girl while I was dreaming? I wasn't ready for that. "And your mom won't let you go meet her? That's so unfair. It's not like you're going to meet up with a boy." I sighed. It wasn't the worst thing I could do, but nervous butterflies still danced around in my stomach when I thought about how I was going against my mother's wishes. Savannah gave a giggle from across the room. "I've never done anything rebellious before." You wouldn't think that looking at her. This week, her hair was the color of a ripe plum, and her eye makeup was so dark that it made her eyes look twice their size. A lip ring and nose piercing would have suited her ensemble as well, but she said she had enough holes in her face with the double piercings in her ears. Me either. I'm not proud of it, I wanted to add, but I didn't want Savannah to get suspicious of why I was doing this. I didn't care what my mom said, though. I had to find answers. Savannah puckered her lips in the mirror one last time before standing from her chair. "Okay, let me just grab my purse and I'll be ready to go." I slipped my own purse over my shoulder and followed Savannah down the hall. I wasn't sure what I was going to do once I got there, or how I was going to ask questions when Savannah was around. I had several hours in the car to figure out a game plan, but that didn't seem like enough time. Heck, I was going to meet up with a girl who saw me astral traveling. There would never be enough time to prepare myself for this. My purse buzzed against my hip as I clicked open Savannah's passenger side door. I slid into the seat and pulled my phone out of my purse. It was a text from Colin. "You up to anything today?" "Just hanging with Savannah," I texted back. "I'm bored. Mind if I join?" "What's up?" Savannah asked, gesturing to my phone. She flipped her purple hair over her shoulder and clicked her seatbelt into place. "It's Colin. He wants to hang out." Normally I wouldn't mind, but I didn't know how to keep them both occupied while I secretly talked to the blonde girl about what I could do. Savannah shrugged. "I don't mind if he comes along." I realized maybe they could keep each other occupied so that I could have a few moments alone with the girl. "Let me check with him real quick." I quickly typed back. "We're headed out of town. You up for a road trip?" 5 minutes later, Colin and I were seated together in the back seat of Savannah's car, and I was giving her directions to Peyton Springs. I only hoped this wasn't a mistake. Chapter 5. Luckily, Savannah and Colin didn't ask too many questions on the way. I stuck to my story about meeting the girl online and told them I wanted to meet her because we shared mutual interests. I hoped that wasn't a lie, but when they asked what I meant, I told them she was a runner like me. When they began asking more complicated questions, like what the girl's name was and why I hadn't mentioned her before, I dodged their questions by suggesting we listen to music. Savannah's voice rang above the music as she sang along, drowning out all conversation. 20 minutes from Peyton Springs, I released Colin's hand that had been entwined in mine the whole trip. I didn't want him to notice the way my palms began to increasingly sweat the closer we got. I hoped the blonde girl would be at divination when we arrived. She had to know something. No one had ever seen me outside of my body before. "What's with this place?" Savannah eyed the brick building as we drove up to it. I shrugged, hoping it came across nonchalantly. Her mom works here. You know, you guys don't have to come in. You could go get coffee or something. I don't mind. Savannah let out an amused breath of air. It's no problem. This place looks interesting anyway. She stepped outside of the vehicle. Colin turned to me and spoke for the first time since Savannah had turned on the music. Are you okay, Kai? I blinked far too rapidly for my own liking. What? Yeah, I'm fine. He was starting to get to know me too well, but he let the lie slide. He leaned over to give me a peck on the cheek before turning to his door and sliding out of the car. I followed my friends into the shop. The bell above the door rang, earning us a friendly smile from the woman behind the counter. She was tall and curvy, with a pile of auburn hair tied into a loose bun atop her head. I returned an attempted smile and proceeded to occupy my gaze with one of the candles nearby. Savannah sniffed one and let out a moan of pleasure. Well, are you going to find your friend? Colin asked, shoving his hands in his jean pockets and glancing around. I had to release my lower lip from my teeth to answer. Yeah, I just, wanted to look around a little. He didn't question that and began inspecting the nearby crystal balls. I glanced back up at the woman behind the counter. I didn't know how to approach the topic, but I found myself making my way over to her. She smiled at me. Can I help you find something? I couldn't meet her eyes. Instead, I stared at the array of chocolates in a display case next to her. What flavor do you recommend? The truffles are one of the most popular. Are you a fan of peanut butter or mint? Those are my personal favorites. I leaned toward the display case to inspect the flavors. Or perhaps strawberry? The woman suggested. The tension in my shoulders eased when she shot me another smile. You look like a strawberry kind of gal. I laughed without having to force it. My fingers twirled around the end of my red ponytail. The strawberry chocolate sounds good. I am actually looking for someone. Maybe you can help me? She pressed her lips together. That depends on who you're looking for. How could I even begin to describe her? She's blonde, about my age, can see people who are astral traveling, sound like anyone you know. Her mom works here, I said. It was the best I could come up with. Oh. The woman stretched out the word in realization. You mean Crystal? Yes, I finally had a name for her. She doesn't come into the shop much anymore. She used to work here part-time, but then volleyball started, and of course, she wanted to spend time with Robin, and she just got too busy. The woman waved her hand like I should know what she meant by all of that. I'm Diane, by the way. Again, she said it like I should know who she was. Maybe if I actually knew Crystal, I would have heard of her. Did you want me to ring up your total now, or should I hang on to these while you finish browsing? She asked. I glanced around the store. Savannah and Colin chatted near the magic kits. I turned back to the woman. I'm not sure how long we're staying. So, Crystal isn't going to be around today? I did my best to make it sound like we were friends. Diane shook her head apologetically. It's just that I got a new phone and I lost all my contacts. I was really hoping to talk to her. I silently applauded myself for how quick I was on my feet. I should be like a professional liar, I told myself, though I didn't think that was exactly something to be proud of. She's probably at home. If you're in contact with Emma or Derek, you could ask one of them for her number. I had no idea who these people were, but I tried my best to play along. Like I said, I lost all my contacts. It's no big deal. I honestly didn't know how I was going to finish that sentence, but luckily the bell on the door rang just then, distracting us both. Diane's gaze locked across the shop at the same time I turned to look at the person who'd just entered. Once I processed the long blonde hair and thin frame, my heart stopped. Crystal froze in the doorway, and the paper bag she'd held in her hand crashed to the floor. Chapter 6. It felt like time froze in the following moment as we stared at each other, but it couldn't have been more than a second before Crystal bent to scoop up her bag. She approached me without ever taking her eyes off mine. She opened her mouth twice to say something, but closed it both times before getting anything out. Finally, she managed to tear her gaze off my face and look at Diane. "My mom?" was all she said. Diane gestured over her shoulder. "She's going through some inventory in the storage room." Crystal held up the paper bag in her hand. "I didn't want her to go hungry. She keeps forgetting to eat, and she can't keep doing that. I'll go find her. Crystal surprised me by turning my way. We need to talk. My feet moved under me without consciously deciding to, and I followed her down the hall I'd seen the other night. I peeked back at my friends and saw they were now occupied by the crystal balls on display. Crystal paused outside a door and peeked inside. Mom, I brought you some lunch. I'll set it in the break room, okay? Don't forget it this time. I couldn't see into the room, but I heard her mother's reply. Thanks, sweetie. Crystal crossed the hall and slipped her mother's lunch into another nearby room. The look she shot me told me to follow her. We continued to the end of the hall, out a door, and down a few steps into the chilly November air. At least the sun was out today, which helped warm my cheeks. As soon as the door clicked shut behind us, we both spoke at the same time. Who are you? Crystal asked. Can you astral travel? I said simultaneously. We both went silent for a moment. Crystal was the first to speak. What's going on? You're not... She reached over to run her fingers across the back of my hand. It was awkward for a moment, but she came across friendly. You're here. I mean, you're solid. You're not dead. I took a step away from her. What? No. Don't you know what I can do? That's why I came here. She tilted her head. I think we should start over. I'm Crystal Frost. She reached her hand out in a friendly gesture. I shook it. I'm Kai. She glanced down the street. When she saw no one else was around, she spoke slowly. I'm only telling you this because there's clearly something going on here, but I'm, psychic. I see ghosts and predict the future. She crossed her arms over her chest. And clearly you're not a ghost, so your turn. Was she for real? Ghosts? Predicting the future? It didn't sound real. Except, if astral traveling was possible, wasn't all this other paranormal stuff just as likely to be real too? Apparently I hadn't said anything for a while because Crystal raised her eyebrows, waiting for an answer. I'm not psychic, My face grew hot despite the cool air brushing across it. This had always been my big secret, and I'd never told anybody who would believe me before. I didn't even keep a diary where I could dish my secrets. It felt wrong to tell a complete stranger. Crystal's shoulders relaxed, and a compassionate expression crossed her face. You've never told anyone, have you? Is that a psychic thing? I wondered. Crystal raised a single shoulder and then let it drop. Not really, but I can feel other people's emotions when I touch them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Ghosts, the future, emotions. It all sounded so unbelievable, but at the same time, it amazed me. So when you touched me just now, you felt what I was feeling? Crystal nodded. I didn't mean to. I was just making sure you were real. She laughed lightly. I don't get it, though. I saw you in the shop that night. I thought you were a ghost. It really kind of freaked me out when I saw you in there just now, all solid and everything. Honestly, I don't understand it myself. My knees began to shake, and it wasn't even that freezing outside. Can we sit? I didn't wait for an answer. I sank onto one of the steps we'd just walked down. Crystal sat beside me. I didn't know what it was about her, but she seemed nice, like we could actually be friends. I came here for answers, and Crystal seemed to know what she was talking about, so I decided to confide in her. Once I started speaking, the words just sort of tumbled out of me. I can astral project, so my spirit leaves my body when I'm sleeping. I can go anywhere and see things in real time, but only as they're happening now in the present. I've always been able to do it, but I don't understand why. I knotted my sleeves in my hands, but nothing I could do in this moment could slow my racing heart. Usually by now, someone would stop me and tell me I was making it all up. I actually came to ask you about what I can do. I don't know if it was your mom or the lady at the counter, but I read online about this woman who runs the shop. I thought that maybe she could tell me a little bit about the paranormal. When my mom wouldn't let me come, I decided to scope out the place and see if it was worth coming to. And that's when you saw me. I began to relax the more I talked to her. I've never met someone else who can do what I can, so I'm looking for someone who can explain it to me. All I know is that when I fall asleep, my spirit leaves my body. I can take it anywhere I want. I just can't touch anything, and no one else can see me, except for you. Crystal nodded like she understood. It certainly sounds like astral traveling. That's what I thought! My voice came out high and squeaky. Hope filled my heart. So she did understand. I mean, I don't know a lot about this stuff, so I'm just getting that from what I read online. You know what? She asked kindly. Maybe you should talk to my mom. After all, she's the person you came here to talk to. My friend Emma is pretty good with this stuff too. Crystal began to stand, but I stopped her. Your friends know? That you're psychic? The word sounded strange on my tongue. The only concept of the paranormal I had ever really considered was astral traveling. It sounded silly to think that all this other stuff Crystal said she could do was possible. She nodded confidently. My friends have no idea, I said. The other two people in there? The guy is my boyfriend, and the girl is my best friend. I only brought them along for the ride. She looked at me sympathetically. You should tell them. I'm sure they'll be really understanding. I crinkled my nose. I don't know. We've never even talked about the supernatural. I've tried to tell Savannah, and she thinks I'm making it up. You're the only person who knows what I can do, and I only told you because I thought maybe you could help me understand it. And well, you seem nice. Thanks, she said with a smile. But they're your best friends. I'm sure they'll support you. I'll help you convince them of the truth. I don't think I'm ready for that. That expression of understanding crossed her face again, and I mentally thanked her for not pushing it any further. Wait, can she read my thoughts, I wondered? She didn't give any indication that she could read my mind. I should get back to my friends, I told her. I kind of just disappeared on them. My friends think we know each other. I told them we met online and that I wanted to meet you because we're both into running. I hope you like to run. A wide smile spread across her face. I can play along. Come on, let's go talk to my mom. Chapter 7. Crystal and I found her mom in the storage room. Her mom was really pretty, and she brushed her hair out of her face as she turned to us. I noticed the name tag on her lanyard read Andrea. Need help with something? Yes, Crystal said. This is my friend Kai, and she has some questions about astral traveling. Her mom's eyes lit up. Let's go across the hall to the break room. I followed her across the hall, and the three of us took a seat around a small table. What kind of questions do you have? Andrea asked. I'm curious why someone might be able to astral travel and others can't, I said. The first thing to understand is that we're all born with a connection to the other side, Andrea explained. Some of us have a closer connection than others. Sometimes that's due to genetics, and other times it's something within our spirit. There are also those who are not necessarily born with a gift, but can develop one through spiritual and intuitive practices. It's something I've always been able to do, I admitted. It wasn't so hard to tell Andrea after I'd already told Crystal. They really seemed like they understood this stuff. Then I would assume the ability is tied to your spirit, Andrea said. It's not always clear why, but I believe there are forces on the other side that guide some of us to develop these abilities, because having these gifts allows us to help other people. Sometimes we need these gifts to heal ourselves too. I thought about the way my gift had helped before. Because of my astral travels, I had witnessed a murder, and nobody believed me until my friends and I caught the killer. I wondered if that was why I had this gift, because I was supposed to solve that murder all along. But if that were the case, why could I still astral travel? And was there more good I could do with my gift? I mulled these thoughts over. You said sometimes we need the gifts to heal ourselves. Ever since I was a kid, I always felt like I wanted to get away, to run from my town and never come back. Do you think maybe I developed this gift because I needed the escape? That's a very good theory, Andrea said. But it's one only you can know the answer to. I think I'd already known that for a long time, but had never admitted it to myself. What about the mechanics of astral travel? I wondered. I know how it feels, but I don't understand how it all works, and if there are rules I haven't pushed the limits to yet. If you're looking for answers about that, then I suggest you talk to someone who can do it. Andrea turned her gaze toward Crystal. I think you two have some studying to do. I gasped. You can astral travel, Crystal? She hadn't mentioned it earlier. It was just the once, she admitted. I've been working on it, but I haven't done it again. But I'm like this close. She held her thumb and index finger just millimeters apart. If you've done it once, I'm certain you can do it again, her mom said. Remember, having a gift still requires practice to master it. Crystal turned to me. Well, what do you say? Should we see what we can do together? I'd never had anyone to astral travel with, and I found myself beaming. Absolutely. By the time we returned to the front of the shop, Savannah and Colin had made it back to the candles and were sniffing them again. They both looked up when they noticed my approach. Hey guys, this is my friend I was telling you about, I introduced. Crystal, these are my friends Savannah and Colin. Hi, Savannah gave a light wave. Kai didn't tell us much about you. We were starting to wonder if you were real. Leave it to Savannah and her big mouth to make the conversation awkward. I didn't miss when Colin lightly elbowed her in the ribs. She shot him the evil eye. It's great to meet you, Colin said sweetly, reaching out to shake Crystal's hand. You too, Crystal replied, moving to shake Savannah's hand as well. Kai's told me so much about you. Her eyebrow twitched ever so slightly at the lie, but neither Colin nor Savannah seemed to notice. It's so great to meet you all in person, Crystal added. What do you say we go back to my house and hang out? Savannah and Colin exchanged a glance. That sounds fine, Colin said. I mean, Kai knows you, so if she's fine with it, so are we. Great, Crystal smiled. Let me just go talk with my mom. She disappeared into the hallway again. She seems nice. Colin moved to entwine his fingers in mine. The gesture relaxed the final bit of my lingering nerves. Yeah, Savannah agreed, setting down the last candle she'd sniffed. I like her. Thanks, guys. Hey, does anyone want chocolates? I'll buy, I offered. My friends and I approached the counter where Diane had kept my chocolates safe for me. Colin and Savannah picked out their own candies, which she added to the bag. Just as Diane handed over the receipt, Crystal emerged from the hallway. My mom says you guys can come over. You ready? Chapter 8. Crystal took the front seat in Savannah's car and gave her directions to her house. As strange as it may seem to be invited over to a complete stranger's house, this didn't feel that weird. Feel free to take off your shoes and get comfortable, Crystal offered when we entered her living room. Anyone want some snacks? Maybe lunch? Kai, can you help me in the kitchen? Her kitchen was mostly open to her living room, but there was a short wall separating part of it that gave us a small amount of privacy. She pressed her hands to her face for a moment before dropping them. I'm sorry if this is weird. We need more time to talk about things, and I need to distract your friends. I sent my friends a text, so they'll be coming over soon. This was the only place I thought we could all go. There's not exactly much to do in this town. I knew exactly what she meant. There wasn't anything to do in Amberg either. It's fine, really, just as long as your parents don't mind. And mine will never know, I thought. Yeah, it's fine. I convinced my mom. Remember how I can feel people's emotions? Well, it was pretty clear when I touched each of you that you're all trustworthy. I smiled at that. So the handshake thing was a ploy. Very sneaky, Crystal. I like you. Snacks? Crystal turned to the cupboard. We returned to the living room with a bag of pretzels and some string cheese. Sorry, guys, Crystal said. This is all we have for snacks. Savannah straightened up on the couch. It's totally fine. That's so nice of you to offer. She took a string cheese from Crystal's outstretched hand. Thank you, Colin said from the couch when Crystal handed him the pretzels. The doorbell rang, and Crystal hurried over to answer it. I took a seat between my friends and leaned into Colin's shoulder. It was warm and inviting. An excited female voice came from just outside the door. I brought games. We have more than enough, a male voice agreed. Crystal opened the door wider to invite her friends inside. Hi, the girl sang cheerfully as she set her pile of board games on the ground. The boy placed an equally high stack next to it. These are my friends Emma and Derek, Crystal introduced. And this is my friend Kai and her friends Savannah and Colin. We all exchanged smiles and waves. Emma brushed dark curly hair out of her face and then held onto Derek's hand. Apparently, they were an item. So what do you guys want to play first? She asked. Savannah hurried over to the pile of games to inspect which ones Emma had brought along. Meanwhile, Colin wrapped an arm around my waist and pulled me close, placing a light kiss along my hairline. You okay? He asked. I tore my gaze from the amusing show of excitement Savannah was putting on. Yeah, I'm fine. Why? You've seemed nervous all day. I squirmed slightly. How had we only been going out a month and he already knew me so well? It's just this whole meeting new people thing. I'm not that good with people. I noticed, he teased. I poked at him playfully. Sorry, I love this game, Savannah exclaimed, holding the box out in front of her. Too bad it's only for 4 players. That's perfect, Crystal said from across the room with almost too much enthusiasm. I mean, that's fine. Kai and I have some catching up to do anyway. We don't mind. I caught her exchange a glance with Emma. That's great. Emma reached for the box in Savannah's hand. I love this game too. Now we have the perfect amount of players. I suspected she was playing off whatever look it was Crystal shot her way to earn us some privacy. You go play, I told Colin. I want to get to know Crystal a little more. Have fun, he told me. Emma spread out the game board, and Derek helped get out the pieces and cards. Colin joined them on the floor cross-legged while chewing on a few pretzels. Hey, Kai, Crystal said loud enough for everyone to hear. That scrapbook you wanted to see is in my room. Want to check it out? I took a deep breath and followed her down the hall. Your friends really know what you can do? I asked as I stepped into her bedroom and out of earshot of the others. She sat on her bed and nodded. So they're, in the loop about what's going on here? I'm sorry, is that not okay? I didn't tell them what you could do. I just asked them to distract your friends while we talked. I sank into the chair next to her desk. No, it's fine, really. Crystal shifted on her bed to cross her legs. So tell me more about what you can do. When I fall asleep, I just get right back up again, only my body doesn't come with me. I look and feel like me, but I can't touch anything. It's like I'm a ghost. Crystal leaned her chin on her fist like she was invested in my confession. When she didn't say anything, I continued. It's kind of like I am dreaming. I've never really experienced dreams, but there are similarities from what I've heard. Crystal tilted her head slightly. What do you mean by that? I pressed my lips together. Well, like how you can be in one place one moment and then somewhere else in the blink of an eye. The difference is that it all feels real to me, and I can control where I go as long as I can visualize it. So if it feels real to you, does time move at the same pace? Crystal dropped her fist from her chin. For me, time doesn't really apply in my dreams. I could maybe be dreaming just a few minutes and then wake up. Sometimes I might not even remember my dreams, so time seems to go faster when I'm sleeping. No, it's not like that. I'm aware of everything around me, so if I'm asleep for 6 hours or something, I experience the full 6 hours. Crystal's eyes lit up. That's cool. I gave her a nervous smile. It can get boring sometimes, too. Sometimes I like to just sit there and take in the scene. I play this game with myself where I try to interpret different things around me, like the temperature or the wind. You mean you can't feel that kind of stuff? I shook my head. No, but you know how you can feel whatever is happening in your dreams? I mean, to some extent. Well, it's kind of like that. I can feel it because I tell myself to feel it. It just makes sense. But if I'm not paying attention, if my brain doesn't process that I'm supposed to feel something, I don't. Like if I step into the ocean, it doesn't feel cold because I convince myself it doesn't. I've never actually been to the ocean, so what do I know? Crystal smiled. I think I get what you're saying. It'd be so much easier to explain this if I could just bring you along and show you. Crystal's smile grew wider. So take me with you. Can you fall asleep now? I stood from my chair and walked over to her window. If we close the blinds and maybe put on some soothing music, I can be out in no time. You? She nodded. Yes. I turned back to her after closing the curtains. A small amount of light filled the room, just enough that I could still make out shadows of the furniture. I think it's worth a shot. Crystal tossed a pillow at me, and I situated myself on the floor at the foot of her bed. She turned to her phone, and a moment later, a slow melodic tune played through the speakers. She lay on her bed and took a deep breath. I'll see you on the other side, Kai. Chapter 9. As soon as the music began playing, my muscles relaxed. I took a deep breath in and let it out slowly. Voices carried down the hall and into the room, but I ignored them and focused on the soft melody and my slow breathing. Though I wasn't tired, it didn't take long for the music to lull me into a light sleep. My spirit separated from my body. While my chest continued to rise and fall from where I lay on the floor, my spirit sat upright. I pushed myself to a standing position and nearly toppled over in response to what I saw. It was like I was seeing doubles. A not-so-solid copy of Crystal's body hovered over her actual body. A strange silver material connected the two copies as if her spirit was made of a million small shiny strings that tethered her to her body. Her spirit eyes remained closed, like she didn't even realize she'd partially materialized on this plane of existence. A murmur snapped her spirit back into her body, and she bolted upright in her bed. The motion startled me awake before she could spot me standing there. The image of her sitting in bed washed out of view, and I opened my eyes to the dark ceiling above me. "Kai," she whispered, peeking her head over the end of the bed. "Are you still awake? It's not working for me." "You almost did it!" I exclaimed, sitting up. "I did?" Crystal asked in surprise. "I didn't feel anything." It was really strange. It was like your spirit wanted to separate from your body, but it couldn't quite do so. I've never seen anything like it. "Maybe I need a nudge into this other plane?" she suggested. Her eyes lit up like she had a good idea. "What if you sort of pulled me in?" I narrowed my eyes and thought, "Is that a thing? Can I do that?" She let out a light laugh. "I honestly have no idea, but it's worth a shot, right?" I agreed and lowered myself back to the floor. I once again went through the process of relaxing my body and drifting off into a light sleep. As soon as my body fell asleep, I peeled my spirit away from it and stood. I expected to see the same thing I did before, but instead, I only saw Crystal's solid body lying on her bed. I didn't have to wait long until a light silver mist rose from Crystal's form. The threads that appeared to make up her spirit wove together until they began to take the shape of her body. Her features defined until that same copy of her I'd seen before hovered above her sleeping form. I watched in awe and waited until her spirit had taken full shape. Well, as much as it could anyway. It remained slightly transparent, and those silver threads still stretched from her spirit to her body, waving slightly as if a light breeze was traveling through the room. All I had to do was pull her onto this plane. I reached out toward her spirit's wrist. To my surprise, my hand clamped around something solid. My breath hitched in my throat. It was so strange to feel something while outside of my body. Usually my hand just went through everything. I gently pulled at Crystal. She felt heavy, like her spirit was resisting and didn't really want to separate from her body just yet. I tugged a little more, and then just like that, Crystal's spirit detached from her body. The silver strings dissipating, as if finally giving her permission to join me. Her spirit fell to the ground, and she gazed up at me in shock. "It didn't work." I couldn't find my jaw to move my mouth. I was pretty sure it was on the floor right about now, but I was too shocked to go searching for it. All I could do was point to her unmoving form on the bed. Crystal's eyes shifted to follow my gaze, and she gasped. When she finally found her voice again, she couldn't contain herself. She shot up to stand next to me, never taking her eyes off her body. "It did work! This is so cool! It's like looking at myself in a mirror, only way freakier. Wow! Think of the things we could do, the people we could help by going unnoticed." I admired her. The moment Crystal discovered she could do this, her first reaction was, "Let's help people." "You know what else we could do?" Crystal continued, sounding excited. "You said you can go anywhere, right? So you could come here and pull me out of my body every night so we could go on adventures together. Oh, it would be so fun." Crystal's hands grazed my shoulder as she threw her arm out in excitement. The sensation caught me off guard and pulled my full attention back to her. My whole life I'd been able to astral travel, and even though I'd learned a lot about it over the years, there was one thing that remained consistent. I could never touch anything while in my spirit form. I reached out for Crystal's hand without really deciding to. She eyed me as if to ask what I was doing. "Feel this?" I asked, squeezing her hand slightly. She nodded. "Now try to touch something else. Anything." Okay." She turned from me and reached for a stuffed owl sitting on her nightstand. As I expected, her fingers fell straight through it. She took a step back. "Whoa, that is freaky." I shrugged. I'd always been used to it, but this whole feeling something else while astral traveling was bizarre. Crystal turned back to me. "So we can't touch anything here?" apparently just each other. Sometimes you can imagine things and they feel real, but you can't influence the real object on the physical plane. She nodded like she understood. So, if we can't touch anything, then why don't we just fall through the floor? Good question. Watch this. I plopped myself down at the end of her bed. Seems pretty solid, right? But see what happens when I try to grab your blanket. I demonstrated for her, but my attempts fell flat. I couldn't influence the sheets one bit. I don't get it, she told me. I think it has to do with our perception, I said. Like we're not really standing on the ground or sitting on the bed. We just think we are because we tell ourselves we are. Remember how I explained that I can feel the wind if I tell myself I should? Right. So why do our hands fall through objects? Like, why don't they just slam into something hard? We know the object is there, but we can't influence it. She tried again at the stuffed owl. I think it's because deep down we know that we're not solid, but that the stuff around us is. So when you realize that you can't feel or influence the object, the logical explanation then would be because you're the thing that's out of place. The difference is that when you walk across the floor, you're not trying to influence it. So nothing is wrong about that scenario that you have to make up for. Make sense? Crystal shifted her weight between her feet, perhaps testing my theory. I guess it makes sense. There's something else I can do. Watch. I walked over to the stuffed owl again and picked it up. Only now there were two owls. The one on the nightstand and the one in my hand. It was like I'd duplicated the toy. Crystal's eyes widened. How did you do that? I shrugged. I imagined it, so it became real to me, even though it isn't. It's like I can use my imagination on the astral plane to manipulate my perception. But once I stop imagining it, it no longer exists. I dropped the owl in my hands, and instead of falling to the ground, it disappeared entirely. I can do the same thing with clothes, I told her. I imagined myself in my favorite pair of running shorts and a t-shirt, and my clothes changed instantly. Very cool, Crystal raved. So I could use my imagination to do anything? She lifted her hands, and tiny sparks came out of the ends of them, then swirled around the room like fireflies. I laughed. Pretty cool, huh? It's funny that I'm the one answering all the questions when I came to you so you could answer my questions. She chuckled. I'm not sure how much I can help. You clearly know a lot more about this than I do. Hey, you know what would be fun? Pretending we're ghosts and spying on our friends in the living room? A mischievous grin spread across her face. Kai, I think we are going to get along very well. Chapter 10. Crystal led the way down the hall. Though I knew our friends wouldn't be able to see or hear us, I still felt the need to remain quiet. By the time we emerged into the living room, Crystal was giggling audibly. I quickly joined in on the laughter. Crystal knelt next to her friend Derek and cleared her throat. When no one responded, she shot a glance at me. They really can't see or hear us. She said it like it was a statement, but I could hear the slightest bit of a question behind her tone. I shook my head. They really can't. She waved her hand in front of Derek's face as he took his turn in their game of sorry. Nothing. She did the same thing to her friend Emma. Her attempts couldn't quiet the laughter filling the room. I stood back with my arms across my chest and observed. Savannah and Emma seemed to be getting along and were laughing about a scene in a movie I hadn't seen yet. Colin and Derek exchanged a few words about the girls' obnoxious behavior. I enjoyed seeing our friends getting along so well, as if they'd known each other forever. Crystal continued around their small circle, waving her hand in front of each of them and speaking between their laughter into their ears. A smile of amusement broke across my face as I watched her. She turned to me again. This is so freaky. I know, right? I couldn't contain the excitement in my voice. I finally had someone to share this with. It's like being a ghost, Crystal pointed out while waving her hand in front of Colin's face one last time. Finally, she gave up and turned to me. It's got to be pretty similar, right? I mean, when I saw you that night, I got this feeling that I always get when ghosts are around. Is that what the goosebumps were about? Yeah, she nodded. Hey, want to get out of here? Our friends are pretty loud. I glanced back at them. They were now arguing about how many spaces Savannah had taken and if she'd been cheating. Sure, I agreed. I demonstrated for Crystal how easy it was to walk through her front door, and she followed behind me as I started down the sidewalk. Whoa, Crystal said, staring back at the door. So weird. I thought of another question. How do we wake up? You can just kind of feel that it's time to wake up, and then you do. Isn't that how normal people wake up? Crystal crinkled her nose. I guess. Everything around you just disappears, and you wake back up where you fell asleep. You can kind of feel your spirit spring back into your body. You'll see when you wake up. She bit her lip, but a smile broke out behind the nerves. It sounds scary. So what happens to your body while you're out of it? You keep breathing. Your heart keeps beating. You should still be able to feel that now, even when you're astral traveling, because your spirit and body are still connected somehow. Sometimes, if you're just on the edge of being awake and asleep, you can hear or feel things around you before you actually wake up. Like, you'll be walking here on the street, and suddenly you feel this warm, light weight on you. It's actually your blanket. Or sometimes I hear faint voices of my mom and brother talking in the morning. That's a good indication that you're about to wake up. Crystal nodded like it all made sense, and then she inhaled a deep breath as if testing the air. You can't smell anything, I told her. You have to use your imagination for that. You can just hear and see then, she asked. That's how it works for me, at least. It's kind of like watching something on TV, only you're actually in the scene. She fell silent for a beat, as if digesting the idea. How do you figure this all out? That you could do this? I kept my eyes locked on the sidewalk in front of us. It's just something I've always been able to do. You think it runs in your family? I shook my head. I doubt it. My parents can't do this. My gift runs in my family. My mom's psychic too, but in a different way. I thought maybe if you're looking for answers, someone in your family might know something. I know no one in my immediate family can astral travel. When they talked about their dreams, they always sounded so strange. Maybe it came from one of my grandparents, but they're long gone. My heart dropped when I thought about my grandmother. She died only a month after I figured out I could travel anywhere by visualizing my destination. It's really strange to finally interact with someone, I admitted. When I look at you, you seem so solid, like you're actually in your body. I wonder if I've seen other astral travelers before, but didn't realize it. Crystal tapped her chin. It definitely would be hard to spot. Can you get hurt while outside of your body? I guess your body could get hurt, just like anyone who's sleeping. But as far as I know, your spirit can't get physically hurt. In my town, there's this bluff that I run up to every night. At the top, there's a cliff with a river at the bottom. I always assumed I couldn't get hurt while astral traveling, so I wasn't scared to hang my feet off the edge of the cliff. Wait, so you can get hurt? Crystal asked. I shot her a sly smile. Let me finish. So I was sitting there in my spirit form with my legs dangling off the edge of the cliff. I started to get up to walk over to a different part of the cliff. Just as I was getting up, this really loud owl screeched. I swear it was in the tree next to me. I was so startled that I lost my footing, and I fell. Crystal gasped. You fell off the cliff? Not really. I woke up. You just woke up. Don't get me wrong. It was scary as hell. I mean, I felt myself falling. But I guess that made my heart rate spike, and it woke me up. So if you really think you're in danger, you'll just wake up. Crystal pressed her lips together. Makes sense. What if your body died while your spirit was outside of it? I laughed lightly. Believe me, I do not want to figure that one out. But you're the expert on ghosts. Do you think your spirit would just move on or whatever? Crystal scoffed. I wouldn't say expert, but I guess something like that might happen. It'd just be sad if you got stuck here, you know? I'd hope you could move on. Well, let's also hope that neither of us has to figure that one out. She laughed. Agreed. So you say you can travel anywhere as long as you can visualize it? I nodded. She stared up at the sky. Could you go to the moon? You're bold, I said bluntly, raising my eyebrows. She pushed blonde hair out of her face and laughed. I don't know about that. I honestly have never tried it, I told her. As far as I know, it would work. I've never been limited by where I could go. I just haven't had the balls to try it yet. What's the worst that could happen? You'd just wake up, right? I guess so. But you know what? I have so much of the world left to see that I haven't even really thought about visiting the stars. She tilted her head. How did you learn to do it? To go somewhere else, I mean. It was just a fluke thing, I said. I was 12 when I heard my parents talking about their divorce. I was astral traveling at the time. I just wanted to get away from it and go to my grandma's, and so I closed my eyes and visualized her house. When I opened them, I was there. I shrugged like it was simple. It's just that easy? Crystal asked. Just close your eyes and visualize a place? That's it? Not always, I laughed. At first, it didn't always work. I'd be standing in my bedroom and close my eyes and visualize a place, and when I opened them, I was still in my room. Or sometimes I'd be thinking of a place when another one would pop into my mind, and I'd end up there instead. It took several months before I trained my mind to focus enough that it came easily to me. I think it worked the first time because my emotions were so high, you know? Crystal twisted her mouth to the side like she was nervous. What is it? I asked. She slowed her pace. I practice a lot with focusing my mind to improve my abilities. Do you think I have what it takes to do it? Yeah. Where do you want to go? We stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and turned to each other. Why don't we start out with something easy? She suggested. Something close by and familiar. What about my mom's shop? Sure, I agreed. Okay, Crystal twisted her hands around each other. Can you hold my hand? I know that sounds silly, but I thought that maybe it would help, like how you pulled me in before. Of course. I reached out for her hand. Ready? She closed her eyes and drew in a long breath. Ready. Chapter 11. I closed my eyes with her and visualized her mom's shop. When I opened them, we were both there, our hands still locked together. Sunlight spilled in through the display windows. Quiet, peaceful music that I hadn't noticed before played softly in the background. When my eyes fell on Crystal next to me, hers were still squeezed tightly shut. I gently tightened my grip on her hand to get her attention. You can open your eyes now. When she did, a look of wonder filled them. She didn't say anything, but the shock in her eyes was all too familiar to me. Oh! Crystal's stance changed, catching me off guard. She planted her feet firmly on the ground like she was trying to keep her balance. Do you feel that? I stood still and focused, wondering what could possibly be happening. Was she having some sort of reaction to traveling? What is it? I asked with concern. She blinked a few times. I think I'm waking up. A split second later, she vanished before my eyes. It was like someone had flipped a switch on her existence. At first, a jolt of fear surged through me. I'd never traveled with anyone before, and of course, I didn't know what it looked like when I returned to my body. Witnessing it happen to someone else was an entirely new experience for me, and a freaky one at that. I forced myself to calm down. She just woke up, that's it. Now you wake up. I wasn't in a deep sleep, so I found my eyes with ease. I felt my spirit spring back into my body. When I opened my eyes, I was back in Crystal's room in my own body. Crystal popped her head over the side of the bed again. Of all the things I can do, I have to say that astral traveling is one of the coolest. I pushed myself to a sitting position and crossed my legs, facing Crystal. I wasn't sure what woke her, but I was happy to hear that our friends were still laughing in the living room and not bothering us. I'm glad you're having so much fun with it, I told her. I didn't voice my true thoughts, though. I was happy to finally find someone to share this with. Only, I didn't want Crystal to be the only one. I may not be able to take Colin and Savannah with me onto the astral plane, but I didn't want to keep this secret from them anymore. What's wrong? Crystal asked after a stretch of silence. I'm just thinking about telling my friends, I admitted. How did you tell Emma and Derek? I just told them flat out. They needed some convincing, but they're my friends and we trust each other. I would think your friends would trust you too. I tried not to let my uncertainty bleed into my tone. I want them to, but when I tried to tell Savannah, she thought I was making it up. I haven't told Colin, because I'm worried he'll think the same. Maybe it will help if I'm there? Crystal offered. I shifted uncomfortably. It might be easier with her there, but she was still a stranger. Still, I had astral traveled with her. That had to count for something, right? "We've been in here a while," Crystal pointed out. "We should probably get back to our friends." I visibly stiffened, and Crystal seemed to read my emotions. "You don't have to tell them today," she said. "But whenever you're ready, you can count on me to help." "Thanks," I told her. "I don't know when it will be, but I might just take you up on that offer." When Crystal and I entered the living room, our friends were packing up their game. "Who's hungry?" Derek asked. "I could go for some food," Colin said. "Is there anywhere to eat in this town?" Emma crinkled her nose, which made her look an awful lot like a chipmunk. "We have a little cafe." "I'm hungry too," Savannah agreed. "We should all go get something together." Emma shrugged. "We can walk. It's really not that far." We entered the cafe and claimed a large table in the corner, away from other patrons. I sat beside Colin. While the others looked over the menu and chatted, Colin leaned into me. "Did you girls have a good time?" he asked. "Yeah, it was fun getting to know her," I said. "Who knew I was such a people person?" He eyed me curiously, because that was so not me. "You're sure you're okay? You haven't been yourself all day." I gave a light chuckle, but it sounded forced. "I was just nervous about meeting Crystal." Crystal burst into laughter across the table, pulling my attention from Colin. I wasn't sure what someone had said to make her laugh, but now Emma, Derek, and Savannah were laughing too. My gaze locked across the table at Crystal and her friends. If she could tell them about what she could do, and they accepted that and still had so much fun with her, couldn't I muster up the same level of courage? I didn't know if there would ever be a right time to tell them. I thought Colin said something, but I didn't catch it. I'd been distracted, and he obviously noticed. When I turned my gaze back toward him, Colin cleared his throat and stood. "Excuse me for a minute." Colin was clearly upset. I swore that as he stood and retreated from our table, my heart dropped out of my chest and onto the floor. I stared after him for so long that even after he disappeared down the hall that led to the restrooms, I hadn't noticed the silence that had settled over our table. Finally, I turned back to everyone else. They all stared at me. "What was that about?" Savannah asked. "Are you two good?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. "I think he's mad at me." "What for?" Crystal asked. But I had a feeling she already knew on some level. "Do you want me to go check on him?" Derek offered. I shook my head. "No, I'll go see if he's okay." I pushed my chair away from the table and stood. I headed down the hall, then knocked lightly on the men's room door. "Colin, are you okay?" No answer came for what felt like a full minute. I knocked again. Then the door creaked open. His features were fallen. "You're mad at me," I said. It wasn't a question. "No," he assured me, stepping into the hall. His voice was so soft, like he couldn't believe I'd think that. "Absolutely not. How could I ever be mad at you? I'm worried, Kai." He took my hands in his and squeezed them. "I know there's something you don't want to talk about, and that's okay. I told you that you can come to me at your own pace, and I mean that. I just don't want you to lie to me about how you're feeling, because then I can't help you. You don't have to tell me what's going on, but I need you to tell me when you're not okay." His words shocked me, because nobody had ever shown me that level of understanding before. I loved him so much for it. "All right," I admitted. "I'm not okay." It felt natural to say that to Colin, and I didn't know why I couldn't admit it before. Colin looked worried, and he pulled me into a hug. His body was so warm and comforting. I completely relaxed into his embrace. It was as if he had the power to mend my heart and ease the knot in my gut. It was the kind of hug where I felt like I could be completely honest with him and he wouldn't judge me. Colin pressed a kiss to the top of my head. "I want you to trust that I'm here for you, because I will be here through anything. I promise." I nodded. "I do trust you, Colin, and that's why I need to be honest with you." I drew away and looked into his mesmerizing brown eyes. "Come on, there's something I want to tell you." Chapter 12. I took Colin's hand and led him back to our table. Savannah eyed us curiously, but finally broke her stare once we sat down. The legs of my chair screeched as I scooted myself closer to the table. My gaze traveled toward Crystal across from me in hopes that she could somehow help me find the courage to do this. She smiled back reassuringly. If she could do this, so could I. I faced my two best friends. I have something to tell you guys. It felt strangely comforting to have Crystal, Emma, and Derek there. I never thought that when I told my friends what I could do, I'd tell them in front of strangers. But knowing Crystal's friends believed her made me think that mine could too. Savannah raised her eyebrows in interest, but Colin looked worried. I didn't want him to worry any more. I have a gift, I admitted. I always try to avoid topics about the paranormal, like ghosts and psychics, because I'm afraid no one's going to believe in it the way I do. The thing is, I do believe in that kind of stuff, because I can do it. Savannah furrowed her brow. Is this that dream thing again? Yes, I told her. I know you haven't believed me in the past, but it's time I stop hiding myself just because people don't believe me. You can believe me or not, Savannah, but I believe it, and that's enough for me. What dream thing? Colin wondered. Are you saying you see visions? I can astral project, I told him. Every night when I fall asleep, my spirit leaves my body. I can take my spirit anywhere and see what's happening in real time. Colin furrowed his brow, like he'd never heard of such a thing. Maybe I can help? Crystal offered. Crystal. I started to protest, but she stopped me. It's okay. I'm not shy about it, not anymore. She turned to my friends. I'm psychic. I can see ghosts and predict future events, and sometimes see people's memories. I can also find things. I can't do most of it on demand, but the fact is that I'm different from most people. Colin shook his head, though he looked intrigued. You're not serious. She is, and I'm different too, I said. Saying it out loud felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. What do you mean you're different? Colin asked. I don't get it, Savannah added. Emma cut in with a confident voice. I can vouch for them. You see, everyone is born with a level of intuition. Some people, like Crystal, are born with a more natural connection to the other side. Kai, I'm sure, is the same way. I believe it, Derek said. The kind of stuff I've seen Crystal do, it's amazing. You all really believe in this stuff? Colin asked. My head shook ever so slightly. It's not about believing it. I know it. That's when I realized for the first time that those words were true. I'd always had a hard time telling people because I never truly knew I wasn't making it up. Now, I had no doubt about it. My travels weren't a figment of my imagination. When I astral travel, my body sleeps, but my spirit stays awake, roaming a different place each night until I wake again and my spirit reunites with my body, I explained. It's something I've always been able to do. I don't know why I was given this gift, but I do know I'm not the only one who can do it. I glanced toward Crystal, who was smiling proudly. When I looked back to Colin, I grabbed his hand, willing him to believe me. I also know that I can't keep this to myself any longer. I hate lying to you guys. I don't want to be alone with this anymore. It's just so... Colin's voice trailed off. Savannah finished his sentence for him. Unbelievable. I smiled, because that word didn't hurt me anymore. I know. I didn't believe it for a long time either, Derek said, resting his elbows on the table. I was skeptical until something happened to me. Something happened to you? Savannah leaned into the table in interest. Colin still looked skeptical. How can we be sure you aren't all in on the same joke? I don't like running, Crystal said. That's not why Kai came here today. I didn't even know her before today. She's right, I admitted. I lied about us meeting online because I was afraid to tell you about what I could do. I wanted to come here to ask Crystal questions about it. Savannah leaned back in her chair. You're really serious about this, aren't you? I have been since the first time I tried to tell you, I said. You thought I was crazy. Regret crossed Savannah's features. I never thought you meant it like this. She stood and rounded Colin's chair to wrap her arms around me. "I'm so sorry I never believed you. You're not crazy, and if you were, they'd never get you out of Amberg without hauling me along with you to the loony bin." She rolled her eyes and pointed to her purple hair, as if that was proof of her insanity. I smiled. "Thanks, Savannah. So you believe me?" "Of course I believe you," she said. "Just don't come visiting me in the middle of the night, or you might see something you don't want to see." She winked playfully. I laughed. Believe me, I wouldn't even think about it. Colin turned to face me. "I'm sorry you ever felt like you had to keep this from us. You never asked me what I believe about the paranormal, and if you did, I'd have told you I believe ghosts are real. And if they're real, then I can believe in the rest of this. This sounds like an amazing gift, and I can't wait to hear all about it." My heart lifted, because I never imagined he would react this way. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. In that moment, I felt so loved. "Thank you, guys," I said, looking around the table at all of them. "I came here for answers, but I didn't realize that's not what I was really looking for. You gave me exactly what I needed from this trip. Your support." Chapter 13. The whole ride home consisted of me answering Savannah's unending stream of questions about my gift. I managed to come clean to my friends about everything. I didn't like leaving Peyton Springs behind. I had really made a friend in Crystal today, and I wanted to get to know her better. I relaxed when I realized I'd have plenty of time to do that later tonight. By the time Savannah dropped me off at home, darkness had settled over Amberg. The porch light was on, as if my mom was waiting for me. I quickly checked my phone, but found no text or missed call from her. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and got out of the car. "I'll see you guys on Monday." "Bye, Kai," Savannah waved from the driver's seat. "Sleep tight," Colin added with a smile. I laughed. Savannah drove off, and I turned toward my house. The front door seemed distant. I inhaled a deep breath, and somehow that made it seem within reach. Let's get this over with. When I walked through the door, the scent of tomatoes and chili powder hit my nose. I crossed the living room and entered the kitchen to find my mom standing at the stove. "You're making chili?" I asked. She turned to me with a smile. "We're making chili," my brother corrected. He stepped out from behind the pantry door with a bag of noodles in his hand. "Noodles and chili?" I asked. Weird. "It's what the recipe calls for," he sneered, pointing his tongue in my direction. That used to be a sign that he despised me. Now it was basically his way of telling me he loved me. I stepped around the counter. "Do you need any help?" "Could you set the table?" my mom asked. "Sure." I moved to the cupboards to pull out 3 bowls and spoons. I had to tell my family what I could do, and I wasn't sure how. I didn't have Crystal, Emma, and Derek to back me up this time. I waited until we were all seated around the table and had dished up our chili. After a bite, I realized the noodles weren't that bad in it. I set my spoon aside. "Mom, Brayden, I have something to tell you guys." They wore curious expressions, but neither of them spoke. "I have this gift. It's called astral traveling or astral projection. Basically, when I fall asleep, my spirit leaves my body. I can travel the world in real time. I don't know why I have this gift, since it doesn't seem to run in the family." I shrugged. "I guess some people are just more connected to things like this than others. I've always been able to do it, and I just wanted you guys to know. I don't want to hide who I am anymore." I didn't know what I was expecting from my family, but it didn't surprise me when Brayden burst into a laughing fit, and my mother raised her eyebrows and nodded her head slowly. "Okay, honey," she said, as if I were a child who told her I'd seen the tooth fairy. "Good one, Kai," Brayden laughed, before shoveling another 2 spoonfuls of chili in his mouth. A grin broke out across my face. It didn't matter if they believed me. All that mattered was that I didn't have to hide anymore, and that left me feeling more confident than I'd ever felt before. After brushing my teeth and slipping into my pajamas that night, I crossed the hall and knocked on my mother's bedroom door. As long as I was spilling secrets, I might as well tell her everything. "Come in," she called. I stepped into her room to see she was propped up on her bed working on her computer. She looked up at me and set the laptop aside. I crossed the room and took a seat next to her on the bed. "What is it, Kai?" she asked, sounding worried. I cleared my throat. "Mom, I did something that you're not going to be happy about." She raised her brows questioningly. I went and visited a friend even when you said I couldn't." "You what?" she practically shouted, sitting up straighter in the bed. "I went and visited a friend even though—" "I heard you the first time," she interrupted. Then to my surprise, she began laughing. I didn't know what to do when she reached out to me as if she wanted to pull me into an embrace. I sat there for a beat, before crawling across the bed and into her arms. She wrapped them around me in a warm, comforting hug. "Oh, honey," she laughed. "I'm just glad you're okay." "You mean you're not mad at me?" I asked in shock. "Don't get me wrong. You're grounded for a week. I'm just so happy to see that I raised an honest child." I never expected anyone to call me honest, given how often I lied, but I'd take it. "I'm reducing your grounding sentence from a month down to a week for being honest," she teased with a laugh. "Good to know being honest pays off," I joked back. "I can't go that easy on you. After all the chores I have planned for you, you'll never disobey me again." Her tone implied she was kidding, but I knew she was dead serious. I'd spend the next week scrubbing toilets and cleaning baseboards until they were so spotless, even Mr. Clean would be impressed. I totally deserved it, but meeting Crystal was worth it. My mom pulled away from me, and her expression turned serious. "Really, Kai, I'm just glad you're okay. Now go get some sleep. You're going to need to be in peak condition tomorrow for all the cleaning you have ahead of you." "Ha ha," I said dryly. "You know I'm serious," she said as I crossed the room. "I know," I called back before closing the door. "The joke's on you, though. I love cleaning." She raised her voice as I shut the door. "Fine by me." "As long as we're being honest," I shouted on my way back to my room, "I was lying. Cleaning sucks." Her laughter faded once I shut my bedroom door. I didn't even care about my punishment. Nothing could kill the smile on my face that formed when I realized that for once, my mom and I were actually getting along. Now that my secret was out in the open, I felt happier than ever. I crawled into bed, closed my eyes, and waited patiently for my astral travels to whisk me away on another adventure. This has been Dreaming with Frost, written by Alicia Rades, narrated by Amanda Elgie. Copyright 2017 by Alicia Rades. Production copyright 2024 by Alicia Rades.